The first time Charlotte Reed called me honey, I honestly thought she was talking to someone standing behind me. I was holding a paper cup of hospital coffee that tasted like regret, standing in the emergency room hallway with my 8-year-old daughter asleep against my side, when the doctor opened the curtain and changed my life with one sentence. "Mr. Walker, she thinks you're her husband." For several seconds, I just stared at him. Then I looked past his shoulder at the woman lying in the hospital bed. Dark hair, pale face, bandage across her forehead, expensive coat folded over a chair. Even unconscious, she looked like someone who belonged in places I only saw on television. "That's impossible," I said. The doctor sighed like he'd been expecting that answer. "I understand this is confusing." "No, you don't." I pointed toward the bed. "I've never met that woman before in my life." My daughter Lily stirred sleepily beside me. "Dad?" I lowered my voice immediately. "It's okay, sweetheart." But it wasn't okay. Nothing about that night had been okay since the moment we'd driven past the accident on Old Mill Road. It had started with rain. Heavy rain. The kind that turns country roads into black mirrors and makes headlights look like ghosts. Lily and I were driving home from my bookstore in Willow Creek, a small town where the loudest thing after 9 o'clock was usually the wind moving through maple trees. I owned a little bookstore and coffee shop called The Reading Nook. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't profitable enough to impress anyone, but it was mine. More importantly, it was the place where Lily and I had rebuilt our lives after my wife, Grace, died 3 years earlier. That evening we'd closed late because Lily insisted on reorganizing the children's shelf by emotional importance, which apparently made perfect sense to an 8-year-old. We were 5 minutes from home when lightning cracked across the sky, and Lily gasped from the passenger seat. "Dad!" I saw it a second later. A black luxury sedan had skidded off the road and slammed into an oak tree near the ditch. Steam rose from the hood. One headlight flickered weakly through the rain. For half a second, I froze. Then training I didn't know I had took over. I pulled onto the shoulder, turned on my hazards, and told Lily to stay in the truck. She didn't argue. That's how I knew she was scared. I ran through the rain toward the car. The driver's door was jammed. The windshield was cracked. Inside, a woman slumped against the steering wheel. Blood traced a thin line down her temple. Her phone lay glowing on the floorboard, still connected to an emergency call that hadn't gone through. I shouted. She didn't respond. The passenger side door opened after 2 hard pulls. I leaned across the seat, checked her breathing, then carefully pulled her back enough to keep her airway clear. She was alive, barely conscious. Sirens arrived 12 minutes later. 12 minutes can feel like 12 years when you're holding a stranger's life together in the rain. Paramedics loaded her into an ambulance. One officer asked for my name. Another asked what happened. Lily stood beneath my jacket near the truck, shivering but brave. I should have gone home after that. That would have been the normal thing to do. But then the paramedic said the woman had no identification except a corporate access card with one name on it. Charlotte Reed. Even I recognized that name. Everyone did. Charlotte Reed was the CEO of Reed Global, one of the most powerful retail and logistics companies in America. She was on magazine covers, financial news, charity boards, and probably the nightmares of half her competitors. She was not the kind of person who crashed alone on a back road near Willow Creek. Yet there she was. At the hospital, they asked me to stay long enough to give a statement. Lily fell asleep on a waiting room chair with my coat over her shoulders. I bought terrible coffee from a vending machine and tried not to think about the woman in the emergency bay. Then she woke up. And now the doctor was telling me she thought I was her husband. "She has a concussion," he explained carefully. "Possibly temporary retrograde amnesia." I stared at him. "Temporary? Most likely. Most likely is not comforting." He nodded. "Fair enough." Then he looked back toward the curtained room. When she regained consciousness, she was disoriented. She asked for her husband. When you walked by, she became calm and called you Ethan. My stomach tightened. She knew my name? The nurse mentioned it earlier when taking your statement. That made more sense. Slightly. Not enough. Then the doctor lowered his voice. "There's something else." Of course there was. There is always something else. "What?" He hesitated. She asked where your daughter was. I looked down at Lily sleeping against my hip. My blood went cold. My daughter? The doctor nodded. She believes you and Lily are her family. Silence swallowed the hallway. Rain tapped against the hospital windows. Somewhere nearby, a monitor beeped steadily. Lily shifted in her sleep and wrapped her small hand around my jacket. I looked at the doctor. Then tell her she's wrong. He didn't answer immediately. That silence worried me more than any explanation could have. We need to be careful, he said. Severely contradicting a patient in acute post-traumatic confusion can increase distress. Right now, she's stable because she feels safe. I shook my head. I can't pretend to be her husband. I'm not asking you to lie forever. That's still lying. The doctor's expression softened. I'm asking you to help keep her calm until we can contact her family or legal team. Then the curtain moved. A weak voice drifted from the hospital bed. Ethan? My entire body froze. The doctor looked at me. Lily woke just enough to lift her head. Daddy? Then the voice came again, softer this time. Honey? I closed my eyes. This was insane. Absolutely insane. I was a widowed bookstore owner from a small town. She was a billionaire CEO with memory loss. I had no place in her story. None. But then I looked through the curtain and saw Charlotte Reed staring at me from the hospital bed. Not powerful, not intimidating, not untouchable, terrified. Her gray eyes searched my face like I was the only familiar thing left in a world she no longer understood. And then she asked the question that made everything impossible. Where's our daughter? Lily's small hand tightened around mine. The doctor said nothing. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. I should have corrected her. I should have said, I'm sorry, you don't know us. I should have stepped away before the lie became something bigger. Instead, I looked at the frightened woman in the hospital bed, then at my sleepy little girl beside me, and I said the one thing that changed both our lives. She's safe. Charlotte closed her eyes, relief washing across her face like sunlight after a storm. Good, she whispered. I was so scared. Then Lily, still half asleep and completely unaware of how complicated life had just become, walked toward the bed and placed her tiny hand on Charlotte's blanket. It's okay, she said softly. My daddy helps people. Charlotte looked at her, really looked at her. A faint smile touched her lips. You look just like I dreamed. My heart stopped. Lily looked up at me, confused. The doctor looked worried, and I realized, far too late, that this wasn't going to end in a few minutes. This was only the beginning. This was only the beginning. The next 24 hours felt like a dream someone else was having. A very strange dream. One where a billionaire CEO believed I was her husband and my 8-year-old daughter was somehow her child. The moment Lily placed her hand on Charlotte's blanket, something changed. Charlotte relaxed immediately. Not completely. The confusion remained. The fear remained. But the panic faded. The doctor noticed it. So did I. Unfortunately, that made everything much more complicated. About an hour later, Lily had fallen asleep in a chair beside Charlotte's bed. The two of them looked oddly peaceful together. Meanwhile, I stood outside the room arguing quietly with 3 doctors, a neurologist, and a hospital administrator who looked like he regretted his career choices. Absolutely not. I crossed my arms. No, the neurologist sighed. Mr. Walker, no. Please listen. I'm listening. Another pause. The answer is still no. The administrator rubbed his forehead. We're not asking you to become her husband. That's exactly what you're asking. Silence. Complete silence. Because everyone knew I was right. Finally, the neurologist spoke carefully. Charlotte's memory appears fragmented. Another pause. She remembers emotions better than facts. I frowned. What does that mean? He pulled out a brain scan, which immediately made me nervous because nothing good ever comes after someone pulls out a brain scan. Then he pointed toward a section of the image. She remembers having a family. Another pause. But she doesn't remember who her family actually is. My stomach tightened. And somehow she picked me? The doctor nodded. You were the first person she saw after waking. Another pause. Your name was fresh in her mind. Another pause. Your daughter was nearby. Suddenly the picture became horrifyingly clear. Her damaged memory had filled in the missing pieces. Ethan became husband. Lily became daughter. The hospital became safety. My life became hers. Then the neurologist delivered the sentence I hated most. Correcting her too aggressively right now could make the confusion worse. Silence followed. Then he added, possibly much worse. I looked through the glass toward Charlotte's room. She was awake now, talking softly to Lily. Smiling. Somehow. Then I turned back toward the doctors. How long? The neurologist hesitated, which was never a good sign. Days. Another pause. Possibly weeks. My stomach dropped. Completely. Weeks? Nobody answered immediately. That answer was enough. Back inside the room, Charlotte looked up the moment I entered. The reaction was immediate. Her entire face softened. Relief, trust, familiarity, all directed at a man she'd never met before yesterday. It should have felt uncomfortable. Instead, it felt heartbreaking. Then she smiled. There you are. My pulse tightened. Lily looked up from her chair. Daddy. At least one person in the room knew who I actually was. Then Charlotte frowned slightly. Why do you keep calling him Daddy? Lily blinked. Because he's my dad? Silence. Complete silence. My soul briefly left my body. Then Charlotte laughed softly. Right. Another pause. Of course. She sounded confused, not suspicious, just confused. Then she looked at me. I'm sorry. Her voice dropped. Everything feels fuzzy. I nodded carefully. The doctors said that's normal. Charlotte relaxed slightly. Then she looked around the room. When can we go home? My pulse exploded. Home. Unfortunately, according to her memory, home was apparently wherever I lived. Then the door opened. A woman in a dark business suit entered the room so quickly she nearly collided with a nurse. The moment she saw Charlotte, her eyes filled with tears. Charlotte, the CEO looked at her blankly. Completely blankly. The woman stopped moving. Charlotte? Nothing. Then Charlotte looked toward me. Do we know her? The room froze. The woman looked devastated. Then she swallowed hard. It's me. Another pause. Ava. Silence. Complete silence. Your assistant. Charlotte frowned. The name meant nothing. The expression on Ava's face shattered my heart. Then Charlotte looked at me again. Should I know her? I didn't know what to say. Fortunately, the neurologist stepped in. Unfortunately, things only got worse. Over the next 2 hours, Ava called half of Charlotte's executive team. Lawyers arrived, security arrived, more assistants arrived. Nobody helped. Charlotte remembered none of them. Not one. Board members? Strangers. Executives? Strangers. Lawyers? Strangers. Then someone showed her a magazine cover with her face on it. Charlotte stared at the image, then laughed. That's ridiculous. Silence. That's me? Nobody laughed with her. Because it was true. The woman who controlled billions of dollars couldn't remember owning a single company. Meanwhile, she remembered me perfectly, or rather, she remembered a version of me that didn't exist. Around midnight, the hospital finally quieted down. Most visitors left. Lily slept curled up in a chair beneath a blanket. Charlotte watched her for several minutes. Then she looked at me. She's gotten taller. My heart nearly stopped, because she sounded so certain, so sincere. Then she smiled. Remember when she used to carry that stuffed rabbit everywhere? I froze. Completely. Lily still carried a stuffed rabbit everywhere. It was currently sitting beside her chair. Charlotte's eyes followed my expression. Then she laughed softly. See? Another pause. You forgot too. The room suddenly felt colder, because somehow her damaged memories were creating details that accidentally matched reality. Then Charlotte reached toward the sleeping child. Her fingers brushed a curl away from Lily's face. The gesture looked natural, instinctive, maternal. And for the first time, I saw something beyond the confusion. Love, real love. Not for Lily specifically, but for the daughter her heart believed was hers. Then Charlotte looked at me. I know something happened. Her voice was quiet. I can feel it. Another pause. Everyone keeps looking at me like I'm broken. My chest tightened immediately. Then she whispered, Am I broken? The question hit harder than anything else that day. Because suddenly she wasn't a CEO. She wasn't a patient. She wasn't even a stranger. She was just a scared woman trying to understand why the world no longer made sense. Then I answered honestly. No. Silence. Complete silence. You're hurt. Another pause. That's different. Charlotte stared at me for several seconds. Then something softened behind her eyes. Finally she smiled. Small, grateful, real. You always know what to say. The irony nearly killed me, because I'd known her less than 24 hours. Then the door opened again. The neurologist stepped inside holding a folder. His expression immediately made me nervous. Very nervous. Mr. Walker. I stood up. What? He looked toward Charlotte, then toward sleeping Lily, then back at me. We need to discuss her recovery plan. My stomach tightened. Okay. Silence. Then he delivered the sentence that would change everything. We think the best place for Charlotte to recover is with her family. My blood turned to ice. Because according to Charlotte Reed's memory, that family was us. Because according to Charlotte Reed's memory, that family was us. For several seconds I simply stared at the neurologist. Then I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because sometimes your brain refuses to process reality. No, the doctor sighed immediately. Apparently he'd expected that reaction. Mr. Walker, no. I pointed toward the room. She thinks I'm her husband. Another pause. I'm not. Another pause. She thinks Lily is her daughter. Another pause. She's not. The neurologist waited patiently until I finished. Then he delivered the worst possible response. We know. Silence. Complete silence. Then he continued. But Charlotte's recovery isn't progressing when she's surrounded by strangers. My stomach tightened. Those strangers are her actual life. Unfortunately, she doesn't remember that life. I hated how reasonable that sounded. Then the doctor opened the folder. Every time her executive team visits, her stress levels spike. Another pause. Every time she's with you and Lily, they stabilize. I looked through the glass window toward the room. Charlotte was helping Lily color a picture. The two of them were laughing about something. The sight made absolutely no sense, yet somehow it looked natural. Then I turned back toward the doctor. You're asking me to bring a billionaire CEO into my house. Temporarily. That doesn't make it better. The neurologist actually smiled, which felt inappropriate. Then another voice joined the conversation. I think you should do it. I turned around. Ava stood behind us. Charlotte's assistant looked exhausted. Her usually perfect appearance had been replaced by wrinkled clothes and red eyes. She'd clearly been awake all night. Seriously? I asked. Ava nodded. It's the first time I've seen her smile in months. Silence followed. Then she laughed softly. Maybe years. That caught my attention immediately. Years? Ava looked through the glass toward Charlotte. Her expression softened. People think they know, Charlotte Reed. Another pause. They don't. The sadness in her voice surprised me. Then she continued. Everyone knows the CEO. Another pause. Nobody knows the woman. The words lingered in my mind. Then I looked back into the room. Charlotte was helping Lily draw a rabbit wearing sunglasses. Apparently that was important. Then my daughter spotted me. Immediately she waved. Charlotte waved too. My pulse tightened. This situation had officially become absurd. The next morning brought more meetings, more doctors, more lawyers, more arguments. None of them changed anything. Every evaluation reached the same conclusion. Charlotte's memory remained fractured. Her emotional attachment to me and Lily remained strong. The safest environment for recovery appeared to be a familiar family setting. Unfortunately, that family setting didn't actually exist. Then came the question nobody wanted to ask. What does Charlotte think her life looks like? Ava answered first. Married. Another pause. Small town. Another pause. Bookstore. Another pause. Daughter. My stomach dropped, because every single detail matched my life. Somehow, her injured brain had built an entire reality around the fragments she'd absorbed after waking up. Then the neurologist looked at me. We don't know why. I did. Sort of. My bookstore had been mentioned during the initial hospital intake. Lily had been there. My name had been there. Charlotte's damaged memory had simply stitched everything together into a story that felt safe. Then the doctor delivered the news I hated most. She's being discharged tomorrow. Silence. Complete silence. Tomorrow? He nodded. The concussion is improving. Another pause. The memory issue remains. Another pause. Which means we need a recovery plan. I already knew where this conversation was heading. I just didn't like it. Meanwhile, inside the room, Lily was becoming entirely too comfortable with the situation. That afternoon I walked in to find Charlotte reading a children's book aloud. My daughter sat beside her on the bed, completely absorbed. Then the rabbit said. Charlotte lowered her voice dramatically. Absolutely not. Lily burst into laughter. Charlotte laughed too. The sound surprised me, not because it was pleasant, because it sounded so normal. No trace of the intimidating CEO everyone described. Just a woman reading a story to a child. Then Lily noticed me. Daddy, Charlotte looked up immediately. The reaction happened so naturally it nearly startled me. Her entire face brightened, like she'd been waiting for me to come back. There you are. The words carried a warmth that made me deeply uncomfortable for reasons I didn't fully understand. Then Charlotte frowned slightly. You missed chapter 3. I blinked. What? The rabbit started a bakery. Silence. Complete silence. Then Lily nodded seriously. It was a whole thing. Apparently I'd missed important literary developments. Later that evening, after Lily fell asleep, Charlotte and I found ourselves alone for the first time. The hospital room felt quiet, peaceful. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Then Charlotte looked at me. Can I ask you something? My pulse immediately accelerated. Sure. She hesitated, then asked, Were we happy? The question stole the air from my lungs. Because she wasn't asking about reality, she was asking about the life she believed we'd shared. Then she smiled nervously. I know that sounds strange. Another pause. Her eyes dropped toward her hands. I can remember feelings. Silence. Complete silence. Not facts. Another pause. And every time I look at you, she stopped talking. My pulse hammered. Then she whispered, I feel safe. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Then she laughed softly. I guess that's a good sign. I didn't know what to say. Every response felt wrong. Then Charlotte looked out the window. I wish I could remember. Another pause. I hate not knowing who I am. The vulnerability in her voice hit harder than I expected. Then I answered honestly. You'll get there. Silence followed. Then she smiled. Small. Grateful. See? Another pause. You always know what to say. If she said that one more time, I was going. The CEO looked up. Yeah? Ava swallowed hard, then turned the screen around. A live business news channel filled the display. Charlotte's photograph dominated the screen. Beneath it, a headline flashed across the bottom. Read Global CEO, missing from public view after mysterious accident. The room fell silent. Charlotte stared at her own face on television, then frowned, then looked back at Ava. That's me? Ava nodded slowly. Charlotte looked at the screen again, then at me, then at the screen one more time. Finally, she whispered the words that made my blood run cold. Then why don't I want that life back? Silence swallowed the room, because for the first time since the accident, Charlotte Reed wasn't confused. She was honest. And somewhere deep inside, the answer frightened her almost as much as it frightened me. And somewhere deep inside, the answer frightened her almost as much as it frightened me. The room remained silent long after the news report ended. Charlotte continued staring at the tablet screen. Her own face smiled back at her from magazine covers, corporate interviews, and conference stages. She looked powerful, confident, untouchable. Yet the woman sitting in the hospital bed looked at those images the way someone might look at a stranger. Finally, she handed the tablet back to Ava. I don't remember any of it. Ava nodded sadly. I know. Charlotte looked down at her hands. Am I supposed to? The question nearly broke Ava's heart. I could see it happen. Then Charlotte asked something even worse. Was I happy? Nobody answered immediately. Not me, not Ava, not even the doctor standing near the doorway, because the truth was complicated. Charlotte noticed the silence. Her expression changed instantly. Oh, another pause. That's not a good sign. Ava looked away, which was answer enough. The next morning, Charlotte was officially discharged from the hospital. Somehow, against all logic and common sense, she ended up standing in the parking lot beside my pickup truck. A billionaire CEO, one of the richest women in America, holding a small overnight bag and preparing to move into my two-bedroom house above a bookstore. If someone had told me that a week earlier, I would have recommended professional help. Yet there we were. Then Charlotte looked at my truck. "This is ours?" My pulse tightened. Technically. I stopped myself. The doctors had warned me not to challenge every memory. "It's mine." Charlotte smiled. I always forget that. The terrifying part was that she sounded completely sincere. Then Lily climbed into the back seat. "Shotgun," Charlotte blinked. "What?" Lily pointed at the front passenger seat. "I called it yesterday." Charlotte looked deeply concerned. "I don't remember agreeing to that." My daughter nodded. "That's because your brain is broken." Silence. Complete silence. Then Lily smiled sweetly. "The doctor said so." Charlotte laughed so hard she nearly dropped her bag. Even Ava laughed. The tension disappeared immediately. 30 minutes later we arrived in Willow Creek. Charlotte stared out the truck window as the town came into view. The old church, the bakery, the bookstore, the lake, the flower shop, the small-town streets lined with maple trees. Something about the scene captivated her. Then she whispered, "It's beautiful." My pulse tightened, because she wasn't pretending. She genuinely believed this place belonged to her. Then we stopped in front of the Reading Nook. My bookstore sat on the corner of Main Street, exactly where it had been for the last 15 years. Warm brick exterior, blue awning, large front windows, coffee shop downstairs, apartment upstairs, home. Charlotte stared at it for several seconds, then a strange expression crossed her face. "I know this place." My stomach immediately dropped. The neurologist had warned us about memory flashes. Small fragments could appear unexpectedly. Then Charlotte stepped out of the truck, slowly, carefully. Her eyes never left the building. "I know this place," she repeated. Ava immediately tensed. So did I. Then Charlotte smiled. Relief flooded her face. "This is where we met." Silence. Complete silence. My soul briefly exited my body. Then she continued, "You spilled coffee on me." Lily started laughing so hard she nearly fell out of the truck. Daddy would totally do that. The worst part? She wasn't wrong. Charlotte seemed delighted by her own memory. "See?" Another pause. I remembered something. Ava and I exchanged a look. Neither of us had the heart to explain that the memory was completely fictional. Then Charlotte walked toward the bookstore. The little bell above the door rang as she stepped inside. Immediately she froze. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves surrounded her. Warm wooden tables, comfortable reading chairs, fresh coffee, soft music playing in the background. The place felt cozy, safe, alive. Charlotte slowly turned in a circle. Then something happened. Tears appeared in her eyes. Real tears. My pulse accelerated immediately. "Charlotte?" She looked around again, then whispered, "I don't know why." Another pause. "But this feels like home." The words hit harder than they should have. Because for the first time since the accident, I wasn't thinking about memory loss. I wasn't thinking about doctors. I wasn't thinking about recovery plans. I was thinking about how lonely she must have been before all of this. Then one of my regular customers walked in. Mrs. Henderson, 72 years old, impossible to surprise. Or, so I thought. She took one look at Charlotte, then at me, then back at Charlotte. "Ethan." Her voice sounded suspicious. "Who is that?" Before I could answer, Charlotte smiled warmly and extended her hand. "Hi." Another pause. "I'm Charlotte." Mrs. Henderson shook her hand politely. Then Charlotte added the sentence that nearly caused a medical emergency. "I'm Ethan's wife." The entire bookstore froze. Mrs. Henderson blinked once, twice, 3 times. Then she looked at me. Hard. Very hard. My soul left my body for the second time that week. Then Lily stepped forward. "It's complicated." Mrs. Henderson nodded immediately. "I can see that. By sunset, Half the town had heard some version of the story. Most of them had the details wrong. One rumor claimed I'd secretly married a billionaire. Another claimed Charlotte was writing a book. A third somehow involved international spies. Small towns are dangerous places. That evening, after the bookstore closed, Charlotte sat at the kitchen table upstairs helping Lily with homework. The scene felt surreal. The woman who managed billions of dollars was struggling with third-grade math. Not because she couldn't do it, because Lily insisted on explaining every answer. Then Charlotte looked up. "Why does she need 17 pencils?" I sighed. "Nobody knows." Lily pointed dramatically. "Different pencils have different jobs." Charlotte accepted this explanation immediately, which worried me. Later, after Lily went to bed, the apartment finally became quiet. Charlotte stood on the small balcony overlooking Main Street. The town lights glowed softly below. Then she looked at me. "Can I ask something?" My pulse tightened. "Sure." She hesitated. "If my real life is so amazing..." Another pause. "Why do I feel happier here?" Silence swallowed the night. Because I didn't have an answer. Worse, I wasn't sure I wanted one. Then Charlotte looked up at the stars. "Maybe that's what scares me." Another pause. "Maybe part of me doesn't want to remember." The words settled heavily between us. Then, somewhere deep inside, I felt the first warning sign, because this wasn't temporary anymore. This wasn't a hospital problem. This wasn't a medical case. Charlotte Reed was becoming part of our lives. And for the first time, that terrified me. The next few days settled into something that almost resembled normal life. Which was exactly the problem. Charlotte Reed wasn't supposed to fit into Willow Creek. She wasn't supposed to fit into my bookstore. She definitely wasn't supposed to fit into my small apartment above the bookstore. Yet somehow she did. Every morning she woke up convinced she'd spent years living there. Every morning I woke up trying to remember that she hadn't. The line between reality and memory was becoming harder to see. Then came Monday morning. I walked downstairs to open the bookstore and immediately stopped. Charlotte stood behind the coffee counter wearing one of my spare aprons. My pulse tightened. "What are you doing?" She looked up. "Making coffee." Silence. Complete silence. Then I looked at the machine. Then at her. Then back at the machine. "Do you know how to use that?" Charlotte frowned. "Of course I do." Another pause. "I taught you." My soul briefly left my body again. Then she confidently pressed 3 buttons. The espresso machine immediately sprayed steam across the room. Charlotte jumped backward. I started laughing. She pointed at the machine. "It attacked me." "Pretty sure you started it." 10 minutes later, she was still arguing with the coffee maker. Meanwhile, customers began arriving. Something unexpected happened almost immediately. People loved her. Mrs. Henderson adored her. The high school teachers adored her. The retired couples adored her. Even grumpy old Mr. Wilson, who disliked nearly everyone, somehow ended up drinking coffee and discussing gardening with Charlotte for 40 minutes. By noon, the bookstore felt different, brighter somehow. Then I realized why. Charlotte was smiling, constantly. Not the polished smile from magazine covers, a real smile. The kind that reached her eyes. The kind that appeared whenever Lily told a joke or a customer shared a story. The kind that made her look years younger. Around lunchtime, Ava arrived from Chicago carrying documents. The moment Charlotte saw her, she smiled warmly. "Hey." Ava smiled back. Then her eyes scanned the bookstore. The customers. The laughter. The small-town chaos. Finally, she pulled me aside. I've never seen her like this. My stomach tightened. "Like what?" Ava looked through the window toward Charlotte. "Happy." The word landed harder than expected. Then Ava lowered her voice. "Do you know how many hours she worked last year?" I shook my head. 4,312. Silence. Complete silence. "That's not possible." "Apparently it is." Another pause. "Most weeks she slept in her office." The image bothered me more than it should have. Then Ava looked away. After Emma died, she stopped herself. The unfinished sentence said enough. That afternoon, Charlotte discovered the children's reading corner, which turned out to be a mistake, because Lily immediately recruited her into story hour. 30 minutes later, one of the most powerful CEOs in America, sat cross-legged on the floor reading fairy tales to 6 children and a golden retriever. I stood near the shelves, pretending not to stare. Then Charlotte looked up during the story. Our eyes met. She smiled automatically, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Then I looked away first. That bothered me a lot. That evening, after closing, Lily insisted we have dinner by the lake. The 3 of us sat near the water eating takeout burgers while the sun disappeared behind the hills. It should have felt temporary. Instead, it felt familiar. Dangerous. Then Charlotte looked toward the sunset. I think I used to hate evenings. My pulse tightened. Why? She shrugged. I don't know. Another pause. But every time the sun goes down, I feel relieved. Silence followed. Then she laughed softly. That probably sounds crazy. It didn't. Not really. Because I was beginning to understand something about Charlotte Reed. The woman before the accident hadn't been living. She'd been surviving. Then Lily interrupted my thoughts. Can I ask something? Those words are never safe. Charlotte smiled. Sure. Lily took a bite of her burger, then asked, if you're my mom, why don't you know my birthday? The world stopped. Completely stopped. My pulse exploded. Charlotte froze. The lake seemed to hold its breath. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Charlotte lowered her eyes. For the first time since the accident, uncertainty appeared. Real uncertainty, not confusion, doubt. Then she whispered, I don't know. Lily studied her carefully. The child was smarter than most adults gave her credit for. Then she surprised both of us. She scooted closer and wrapped her arms around Charlotte's side. That's okay. Charlotte blinked. What? Lily shrugged. You forgot. Another pause. People forget things. Then she smiled. Daddy forgot picture day 3 years in a row. I immediately objected. Twice. 3. Twice. 3. Charlotte started laughing so hard she nearly dropped her drink. The tension vanished instantly. Yet later that night, after Lily was asleep, Charlotte stood alone on the balcony. I found her staring at the stars. Quiet. Thoughtful. Different. Then she spoke without turning around. I think she knows. My pulse tightened immediately. Knows what? Silence. Complete silence. Then Charlotte finally looked at me. Her gray eyes seemed older somehow. Sadder. That I'm not really her mother. The words hung heavily between us. Then she smiled sadly. Children always know more than we think. I didn't answer. Because she was right. Then Charlotte looked back toward the stars. The strange part is, another pause. I wish I was. My heart stopped, completely stopped, because for the first time, I wasn't hearing the confused memories of a woman with amnesia. I was hearing Charlotte Reed, the real Charlotte Reed, and somewhere deep inside, that scared me far more than the accident ever had. And somewhere deep inside, that scared me far more than the accident ever had. Because for the first time, I wasn't looking at Charlotte Reed as a patient. I wasn't looking at her as a billionaire CEO with memory loss. I was looking at her as a woman, and that was dangerous. Very dangerous. The next morning started earlier than usual. I woke up to the smell of pancakes. For several seconds I thought I was dreaming. Then I remembered that Lily wasn't allowed to use the stove without supervision. My pulse immediately accelerated. I ran downstairs. Charlotte stood in the kitchen wearing another one of my aprons. Flour covered half the counter. Pancake batter covered the other half. The kitchen looked like it had survived a natural disaster. Then she smiled proudly. Breakfast. I stared at the room. What happened? Cooking. This isn't cooking. I pointed at the ceiling. There's batter on the light fixture. Charlotte looked up. Huh. Another pause. That's probably not ideal. Then Lily came running downstairs. The moment she saw the pancakes, she gasped dramatically. Mom made breakfast? Silence. Complete silence. Charlotte froze. My heart stopped. The words seemed to echo through the room. Mom. Lily froze too, realizing what she'd just said. Then she looked down. Embarrassed. Sorry. Charlotte's eyes softened immediately. For what? Lily shrugged. I didn't mean to. The room grew quiet. Then Charlotte surprised both of us. She walked over and crouched beside her. "You don't have to apologize." Lily looked up. "Really?" Charlotte smiled gently. "Really?" Another pause. "Besides," she laughed softly, "I kind of like it." My pulse tightened so hard it almost hurt. Because the look on Lily's face was something I hadn't seen in years. Since Grace died. Pure happiness. Unfiltered happiness. Then the child launched herself into Charlotte's arms. The hug lasted only a few seconds, but it changed everything. Later that day, Ava arrived carrying more paperwork from Chicago. Apparently, Reed Global was becoming increasingly concerned about the complete disappearance of their CEO. Investors were asking questions, board members were demanding updates. Financial journalists were creating theories. Charlotte couldn't have cared less. She was sitting in the children's section helping Lily build a blanket fort out of reading cushions. Ava stared at the scene in complete disbelief. That woman negotiated a $6 billion merger. I looked toward the blanket fort. Today she's arguing with an 8-year-old about dragon stickers. Ava slowly lowered the paperwork. I don't know which version is more terrifying. The truth was that Charlotte had changed. Or maybe she hadn't. Maybe this was who she'd always been underneath the pressure and responsibility and grief. Then something unexpected happened. Around 3 o'clock, a luxury black SUV pulled up outside the bookstore. The moment Ava saw it, her expression darkened. "Oh no." My stomach immediately tightened. "What?" She looked toward the window. "Board members. Wonderful. Just wonderful." 3 people stepped out. Expensive suits. Expensive watches. Expensive attitudes. They entered the bookstore looking like they'd accidentally walked into the wrong movie. Then the oldest man spotted Charlotte inside the blanket fort. His face lost all color. "Charlotte?" She looked up. "Hi." The man stared, then looked around the fort, then at the cardboard dragon taped to the wall, then back at Charlotte. His soul appeared to leave his body. "What are you doing?" Charlotte blinked. "Building a castle." Silence. Complete silence. Lily corrected her immediately. "It's a dragon fortress." "Right." Charlotte nodded seriously. "Dragon fortress." The board member looked like he might faint, then he turned toward me. "Who are you?" Before I could answer, Charlotte stood up. Her entire expression changed. Protective. Immediate. "He's my husband." The bookstore froze. Every customer within 20 feet suddenly became interested in nearby bookshelves. My pulse exploded. The board member looked horrified. "Charlotte." His voice tightened. "You're not married." Silence swallowed the room. For the first time in weeks, somebody had directly contradicted her reality. Charlotte stared at him. Confusion flashed across her face. Then uncertainty. Then fear. Real fear. My stomach dropped instantly. The neurologist had warned us about this. Then Charlotte whispered, "What?" The man immediately realized his mistake. Too late. Then Charlotte looked toward me. Her eyes searched my face desperately. "Ethan?" My heart nearly broke. Because she wasn't asking a question. She was asking for safety. Then I stepped forward. "Hey." Silence. "It's okay." She looked at me, then at the board member, then back at me. Finally, her breathing slowed. The panic eased, but something had changed. The seed had been planted. Doubt. That evening, the board members left angry and frustrated. Ava stayed behind. The bookstore closed. Lily went to bed. Yet Charlotte remained unusually quiet. She sat on the balcony overlooking Main Street long after sunset. I joined her eventually. Neither of us spoke at first. Finally, she broke the silence. "They're lying." My pulse tightened. "What?" She stared into the darkness. "Those people." Another pause. "They're lying." I didn't answer. Then Charlotte looked at me. "Right?" The question hit like a punch. Because for the first time, she wasn't asking about memories. She was asking about trust. About reality. About me. Then she whispered something that made my chest ache. "I know you wouldn't lie to me." Silence followed. Complete silence. The stars shone above Willow Creek. The town slept peacefully below. And sitting beside me was a woman who trusted me completely. A woman whose heart was slowly becoming part of our lives. A woman, my daughter, had started calling Mom. And for the first time since the accident, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want her to leave. I didn't want her to leave. The realization hit me so suddenly that it scared me. 3 weeks earlier, Charlotte Reed had been a stranger. A name on television, a woman whose life couldn't have been more different from mine. Now she was sitting beside me on a small balcony above a bookstore, staring at the stars and trusting me with her entire world. The worst part? I wasn't sure I deserved that trust anymore, because every day that passed made the lie bigger. Not a malicious lie, not a selfish one, but still a lie. Then Charlotte looked at me. You never answered. My pulse tightened immediately. What? About them. Another pause. The people from Chicago. Her gray eyes searched my face. They're wrong, right? Silence. Complete silence. I hated moments like this, the ones where every possible answer felt terrible. Then I chose the safest truth available. I think they're trying to help. Charlotte frowned. That wasn't my question. No, it wasn't. Then she looked away. Sometimes I feel like everyone is hiding something from me. My chest tightened. Hard. Because she wasn't wrong. Then she laughed softly. Maybe that's the concussion talking. I wished it was. The next morning brought the annual Willow Creek Summer Fair. Normally it was the biggest event of the season. Booths, food trucks, live music, local vendors, children's games. The entire town showed up every year. This year, however, the event had accidentally gained an international celebrity. By 9 o'clock, half the town knew Charlotte Reed would be attending. By 10 o'clock, people were pretending not to stare. By 11 o'clock, they had given up pretending. Charlotte found the entire situation hilarious. They're looking at me. They are. A lot. They are. Another pause. Do I have something on my face? I laughed. Only several $1 billion. She rolled her eyes. Then Lily grabbed both our hands. Come on. Charlotte smiled immediately. Where? Everywhere. Apparently that was becoming a theme in our lives. The fair turned out to be Charlotte's favorite day yet. She won a stuffed bear at a ring toss game. She got powdered sugar all over her shirt. She somehow became a judge in a pie baking contest despite having no qualifications whatsoever. And for the first time since arriving in Willow Creek, she looked completely free. Then something happened that neither of us expected. Around noon, the local photographer started taking family portraits for the town newsletter. Couples, parents, children, grandparents, friends. The line stretched across half the fairground. Then Lily spotted the booth. My stomach immediately tightened, because I knew exactly what was coming. Picture, she announced. Charlotte smiled. Sure. My soul left my body. Absolutely not. Neither of them listened. 5 minutes later, I found myself standing in front of a camera with Charlotte beside me and Lily between us. The photographer adjusted his lens. Perfect. Nothing about this was perfect. Then Lily wrapped one arm around me and one around Charlotte. The photographer smiled. Okay. Another pause. Family, look this way. Family. The word landed like a stone in my chest. Then I looked toward Charlotte. Her smile faded slightly. Just slightly. Like she'd noticed it too. The camera flashed. The moment passed. Yet something lingered afterward. Later that afternoon, Charlotte became unusually quiet, not sad, thoughtful. Then, as we walked beside the lake, she suddenly asked a question. What was our wedding like? My pulse nearly stopped, completely stopped. Then she continued before I could answer. I've been trying to remember. Another pause. I can't. The lake seemed very far away suddenly. Then Charlotte smiled sadly. I remember how it felt. My chest tightened. What do you mean? She looked toward the water. Safe. Another pause. Happy. Another pause. Loved. The honesty in her voice hurt. Because somewhere deep down, those feelings were real. They just belonged to a future that hadn't happened. Then she laughed softly. I'm probably driving you crazy. If only she knew. That evening, after the fair ended, Lily fell asleep on the couch holding her giant stuffed bear. Charlotte covered her with a blanket, then stood there watching for a long moment. Finally, she whispered, I never knew it could feel like this. I looked at her. Like what? Her eyes remained on Lily. Being part of something. Silence followed. Then she smiled. It's nice. The simplicity of that answer broke my heart, because being part of something, being part of someone, being loved, those were things most people took for granted. Charlotte spoke about them like discoveries. Then her phone rang. The sound shattered the moment instantly. Ava's name appeared on the screen. Charlotte answered. Hey. Her smile disappeared almost immediately. Then she listened, and listened, and listened. Finally she looked toward me. My stomach dropped, because I recognized that expression, bad news. Then Charlotte ended the call slowly. The room felt suddenly smaller, quieter, heavier. What happened? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared out the window toward the dark streets of Willow Creek. Then she whispered the words that changed everything. The board voted today. My pulse accelerated. About what? Charlotte looked at me. Fear appeared behind her eyes. Real fear. If my memory doesn't return soon. Another pause. They're replacing me as CEO. Silence swallowed the room, because for the first time since the accident, Charlotte Reed was in danger of losing something besides her memories. She was in danger of losing the life she'd spent 20 years building, and neither of us knew which possibility scared her more. And neither of us knew which possibility scared her more. The answer arrived sooner than expected. The next morning, Charlotte pretended everything was normal. She helped Lily make breakfast. She opened the bookstore with me. She laughed at customers' jokes. She even spent 20 minutes arguing with Mrs. Henderson about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. From the outside, she looked fine. But I could see the difference. Every smile arrived, every laugh ended a little sooner, every quiet moment pulled her somewhere else. Around noon I found her sitting alone in the reading corner. A newspaper rested in her lap. She wasn't reading it. She was staring through it, lost in thought. You okay? I asked. Charlotte looked up and immediately smiled. Too quickly. Of course. I sat down across from her. That's usually how I know you're not okay. Her smile faded slightly. Then she sighed. Am I really that obvious? Only to people paying attention. Silence followed. Then she looked out the window toward Main Street. I built that company for 20 years. Another pause. 20 years. Her voice sounded distant. I missed birthdays. Another pause. Missed vacations. Another pause. Missed relationships. Then she laughed softly. Apparently I even missed having a life. The sadness behind the joke hit harder than she intended. Then she looked at me. What if they're right? My pulse tightened. About what? About replacing me. Silence. Complete silence. Then she looked down. What if I can't remember? The question lingered between us. Heavy. Real. Then I answered honestly. You'd still be Charlotte Reed. She smiled sadly. Would I? Before I could answer, the bell above the bookstore door rang. Ava stepped inside. One look at her face told me something had happened, something big. Charlotte noticed too. Ava? The assistant swallowed hard. There's a problem. Wonderful. There was always a problem. Then Ava held up her phone. News headlines filled the screen. Read global stocks. Drop amid CEO, uncertainty. Board prepares emergency succession plan. Investors demand answers. Charlotte stared at the headlines. Then something surprising happened. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. Deeply tired. Like someone who'd been carrying a weight for too long. Then she handed the phone back. Okay. Ava blinked. Okay? Okay? Another pause. I saw it. Ava looked completely confused. So did I. Then Charlotte stood up. Let's get coffee. Ava stared. Charlotte. What? Your company is falling apart. Silence. Complete silence. Then Charlotte smiled. My coffee is getting cold. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Ava laughed. Actually laughed. You are not the same person. Charlotte's smile softened. Maybe that's the problem. Or maybe it wasn't. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Charlotte found an old family photo album in my apartment. Not hers, mine. Pictures of Grace. Pictures of Lily as a baby. Pictures of birthdays, camping trips, Christmas mornings. Moments frozen in time. I found Charlotte sitting on the couch, flipping through the pages carefully. She stopped when she reached a photograph of Grace. My late wife stood beside me holding newborn Lily. We were smiling at the camera. Young, hopeful, happy. Charlotte stared at the image for a long time. Then she looked up at me. Her eyes seemed different somehow. She was beautiful. My chest tightened immediately. Yeah. Charlotte looked back at the photograph. You loved her. It wasn't a question. Then she smiled softly. I can tell. Silence settled between us. Then she surprised me. Tell me about her. My pulse tightened. Nobody asked that anymore. Not because they didn't care, because they were afraid to. Then I sat beside her. And for the next hour, I told stories. About Grace laughing too loudly during movies. About her obsession with sunflowers. About how she could never remember where she parked. About the way she used to dance in the kitchen while making pancakes. Charlotte listened quietly. Completely. Like every story mattered. Then I realized something. Most people move away from grief. Charlotte moved toward it. Then she asked softly, "Do you still miss her?" The answer came immediately. Every day. Charlotte nodded. No judgment, no discomfort, just understanding. Then she whispered, "I think that's beautiful." My heart nearly broke. Because she understood something most people didn't. Loving someone after they're gone isn't weakness. It's proof they mattered. That evening, after Lily went to bed, Charlotte and I sat on the bookstore balcony watching the town settle into silence. The summer air felt warm. Fireflies drifted across the street below. Then Charlotte spoke. "I had a dream last night." My pulse tightened slightly. "About what?" She hesitated. "A little girl." Every muscle in my body froze. Then she continued. She was laughing. Another pause. Running through a park. Her voice grew quieter. I couldn't see her face. Silence swallowed the night. Then Charlotte pressed a hand against her chest. But when I woke up, another pause. I felt like I'd lost someone. My pulse hammered. Because this was the first real memory fragment she'd described. Not a false memory. Not a dream about Willow Creek. Something older. Something deeper. Then Charlotte looked at me. Fear appeared in her eyes. What if I remember everything? The question surprised me. Wouldn't that be good? She looked away immediately. Toward the stars. Toward the town. Toward the life she'd accidentally found. Then she whispered, "What if I lose this?" The words hit harder than anything else she'd said. Because suddenly I understood. She wasn't afraid of remembering. She was afraid of what remembering might take away. Then before I could answer, Charlotte's phone buzzed. A new message appeared. Ava's face immediately lost color. "Charlotte." My stomach dropped. "What?" Ava swallowed hard, then slowly turned the phone around. A photograph filled the screen. Security camera footage from Reed Global Headquarters. A younger Charlotte Reed walking through a lobby beside a man. Tall, expensive suit, wedding ring. The world seemed to stop. Then Charlotte stared at the image. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes widened. And for the first time since the accident, a memory hit her with full force. Then she whispered 3 words that turned my blood cold. "That's my husband." Silence exploded through the room. Because if Charlotte was right, everything we thought we knew was about to change. Because if Charlotte was right, everything we thought we knew was about to change. The silence lasted several seconds. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Charlotte continued staring at the photograph on Ava's phone, as though the image might disappear if she blinked. Then her hand slowly rose to her forehead. "I know him." My stomach tightened immediately. Ava stepped closer. "Charlotte?" Her voice sounded cautious, hopeful, terrified. Charlotte's eyes never left the screen. "I know him." Another pause. "His name." She pressed her fingers against her temple. "His name is—" The room held its breath. Then Charlotte winced sharply. Pain flashed across her face. The phone slipped from her hand and landed on the couch. "Charlotte!" I was beside her instantly. She closed her eyes. Her breathing became uneven, fast, shallow. For a moment, I thought she might pass out. Then slowly, the pain eased. She opened her eyes again, confused, frustrated. I almost had it. My pulse hammered. "Take it easy." She shook her head. "No." Another pause. "I know him." Then she looked at me. Fear filled her eyes. Real fear. Why do I know him? Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. 10 minutes later, Charlotte sat quietly in the living room wrapped in a blanket while Ava called her neurologist. The doctor's instructions were simple. No pressure. No forcing memories. No overwhelming stimuli. Apparently the brain doesn't appreciate being rushed. Unfortunately, Charlotte had other plans. Bring the picture back. Ava hesitated. Charlotte, bring it back. The assistant reluctantly handed over the phone. Charlotte stared at the image again, this time more carefully. The man looked successful, wealthy, polished. He stood beside Charlotte outside Reed Global headquarters. One arm rested lightly against her back. Familiar, comfortable, intimate. Then Charlotte whispered something unexpected. I wasn't happy. Silence. Complete silence. Ava frowned. What? Charlotte continued staring at the photograph. I remember that. Another pause. Not him. Another pause. The feeling. My pulse tightened. Then she looked at me. I was smiling. Her voice dropped. But I wasn't happy. The honesty in her eyes made my stomach twist. Because somehow she knew, even without memories, she knew. Then Ava slowly sat down. His name is Daniel Mercer. Charlotte looked up immediately. Daniel. The name triggered something. I saw it happen. A flicker behind her eyes. Then another. Like sparks trying to become a fire. Daniel. Her voice sounded distant. Daniel. Suddenly she stood up. The movement was so abrupt it startled everyone. Then she walked toward the balcony. Toward the night air. Toward the darkness beyond Willow Creek. Nobody stopped her. Eventually I followed. Charlotte stood with both hands gripping the railing. The town lights glowed below. Fireflies drifted across the street. Everything looked peaceful, yet she looked like a storm. Then she spoke without turning around. I remember arguing. My pulse accelerated. With him? She nodded. A lot. Another pause. I remember feeling trapped. The words hung heavily between us. Then she laughed softly. A sad sound. Isn't that strange? Not really. Charlotte finally looked at me. No? I shook my head. Sometimes feelings survive when memories don't. Silence followed. Then her eyes softened. You always do that. Do what? Make things feel less scary. My heart did something irresponsible. Then Charlotte looked away again. That's why this is so hard. My stomach tightened immediately. What is? She swallowed. Then whispered, I'm starting to remember pieces. Another pause. And none of them lead back here. The words landed like a punch. Because for the first time, we both understood what was happening. The life she'd built with us wasn't real. The memories weren't real. Eventually the truth would return. Eventually Willow Creek would disappear from her mind. Eventually she'd remember who she actually was. Then Charlotte said the thing neither of us wanted to hear. What happens when I remember everything? Silence. Complete silence. Because there was no good answer. Back inside, Lily wandered into the living room wearing dinosaur pajamas, half asleep, hair completely wild. She rubbed her eyes and looked around. Then she noticed the serious faces. Immediately suspicious. What's wrong? Nobody answered fast enough. Lily frowned. That's grown-up code for something is wrong. The kid was impossible. Then she climbed onto the couch beside Charlotte and leaned against her shoulder. You okay? Charlotte looked down at her. The fear in her eyes softened instantly. Yeah, you sure? Charlotte smiled. Small, fragile, real, not really. Lily considered this. Then she did what Lily always did. She simplified everything. Okay. Charlotte blinked. Okay? Lily nodded. Then we'll fix it tomorrow. Silence, complete silence. Then Charlotte laughed. Actually laughed. That's your plan? Yep. Another pause. Tomorrow is very good at fixing things. The child then yawned dramatically and fell asleep against her shoulder 30 seconds later. Just like that. Charlotte looked down at her, then wrapped an arm gently around her. My chest tightened, because for the first time since the accident, Charlotte wasn't looking at Lily like a daughter she remembered. She was looking at Lily like someone she loved. The difference mattered, more than either of us wanted to admit. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found Charlotte standing alone in the bookstore. The lights were off except for a small lamp near the register. She stood in front of a shelf of novels, lost in thought. Then she turned toward me. "Ethan?" My pulse immediately accelerated. "Yeah?" Silence. Complete silence. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. "If I remember everything?" Another pause. "Will you tell me the truth?" The room suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too honest. Then Charlotte stepped closer. Her gray eyes searched mine, not for answers, for trust. Then she whispered, "All of it." My chest tightened painfully, because I knew that moment was coming. I just hadn't expected it so soon. Then I nodded slowly. "Yes." Charlotte held my gaze for several seconds. Finally she smiled. "Sad, grateful, brave, good." Another pause, because I think it's getting harder to stay lost. And for the first time since Charlotte Reed arrived in Willow Creek, both of us understood that the clock was running out. And for the first time since Charlotte Reed arrived in Willow Creek, both of us understood that the clock was running out. The next week felt different. Not dramatically, not at first. But the change was there, quiet, invisible, growing. Charlotte's memories were returning. Slowly, unpredictably. A name here, a face there. Fragments of board meetings, office buildings, business trips, conversations. Sometimes a memory appeared and vanished within seconds. Other times it stayed. Each one pulled her a little farther away from the life she'd built with us. And that terrified me more than I wanted to admit. The worst part was that Charlotte stopped talking about the memories. At first she told me everything. Every flash, every dream, every detail. Then suddenly she didn't. The change happened so gradually I almost missed it. Almost. One afternoon I walked into the bookstore and found her staring at her phone. The expression on her face immediately made my stomach tighten. She looked up the moment she noticed me, then quickly locked the screen. Too quickly. "Hey," she said. "Hey." Silence. Complete silence. Then she smiled. "How was the supplier meeting?" My pulse tightened. She'd changed the subject. Charlotte Reed never changed the subject unless she was hiding something. Then I sat beside her. "What were you looking at?" Her smile remained. "Nothing." The lie was gentle, harmless, obvious. Then Lily came running through the bookstore carrying a giant paper dragon she'd made at school. The moment she appeared, Charlotte's attention shifted completely. The conversation ended, yet the feeling remained. Something had changed. 3 days later I discovered how much. It happened late at night. I woke up around 2 in the morning and noticed light beneath the apartment door. My first thought was coffee. My second thought was burglars. Neither turned out to be correct. Charlotte sat alone in the bookstore downstairs. The entire room was dark except for a lamp near the register. Papers covered the table in front of her. Newspaper articles, magazine covers, business reports, photographs. My pulse immediately accelerated. Then I saw what she was doing. Researching herself. The real Charlotte Reed. She looked up when I entered. For a brief second, surprise flashed across her face, then guilt, then both disappeared. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. I stared at the papers. "Neither could you." Silence followed. Then Charlotte slowly looked away. My stomach dropped. Because I suddenly knew. Before she said a single word, I knew. Then I asked quietly, "How much do you remember?" The room fell silent. Completely silent. Charlotte didn't answer immediately. She didn't have to. Her silence answered first. Then she whispered, "More than you think." My heart stopped, completely stopped. Then she finally looked at me. Her eyes filled with sadness. "A lot more." The words hit like a truck. Because suddenly every strange smile, every avoided conversation, every hidden phone screen made sense. Then I sat down across from her. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I asked the question I was afraid to hear answered. "How long?" Charlotte closed her eyes. 10 days. My world tilted. 10 days. 10 days. She'd remembered for 10 days. Then she continued. "Not everything at first." Another pause. Pieces. Another pause. Then more. My pulse hammered. And you didn't tell me. It wasn't an accusation. It sounded like one anyway. Charlotte looked down. I know. Silence followed. Then she laughed softly. A broken sound. I tried. Another pause. So many times. Finally she looked up. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Every morning I'd wake up and tell myself today would be the day. My chest tightened painfully. Then she whispered, and every morning I'd see Lily eating cereal. Another pause. Or you'd hand me coffee. Another pause. Or we'd open the bookstore together. Her voice broke. And I couldn't do it. The truth hit harder than anger ever could have, because this wasn't manipulation. This wasn't deception. This was fear. Then Charlotte looked around the bookstore. The shelves, the tables, the reading corner, the life she'd accidentally found. I remembered New York. Another pause. I remembered Read Global. Another pause. I remembered Daniel. My pulse tightened immediately. Your husband. Charlotte laughed bitterly. Ex-husband. Silence. Complete silence. Then she continued. We divorced 2 years ago. My stomach dropped. What? She nodded slowly. The marriage ended long before the accident. Another pause. I just hadn't remembered that part yet. Suddenly everything shifted again. The photograph. The memories. The man. None of it meant what we'd assumed. Then Charlotte smiled sadly. There was never anyone waiting for me. The loneliness in her voice nearly broke me. Then she looked directly at me. The truth is, another pause. When my memory came back, tears appeared in her eyes. I didn't want my old life. Silence swallowed the bookstore. Then she whispered the words I would remember forever. I wanted this one. My heart shattered. Completely. Because for weeks I'd been afraid she'd remember and leave. I never considered the possibility that remembering would hurt her too. Then Charlotte stood slowly. The distance between us suddenly felt unbearable. I know what we built wasn't real. Another pause. At least not the way I thought. Then she smiled through tears, but the feelings were. My pulse hammered so hard it hurt. Then she stepped closer. I don't love you because I lost my memory. Silence. Complete silence. I love you because I found myself. The room stopped spinning. Time stopped. Everything stopped. Then Charlotte laughed softly through tears. There. Another pause. Now you know. The confession hung between us. Beautiful. Terrifying. Irreversible. Then before I could answer, her phone buzzed. Ava. Charlotte looked at the screen. The sadness returned immediately. My stomach dropped. What is it? She swallowed hard. Then answered quietly. The board. Silence. Complete silence. Then she looked at me. They want me back in New York tomorrow. And suddenly the future we'd been pretending not to think about arrived all at once. For several seconds neither of us moved. Ava's name remained glowing on Charlotte's phone screen. The board wanted her back. Read Global wanted its CEO back. New York wanted Charlotte Reed back. The world she'd forgotten was finally demanding her return. Then the phone stopped ringing. Silence filled the bookstore. Heavy. Final. Charlotte stared at the screen, then slowly set the phone down without answering. My pulse tightened immediately. Charlotte. She laughed softly. A tired laugh. Do you know what's funny? I shook my head. A month ago, I would have answered before the second ring. Another pause. I would have canceled dinner. Canceled sleep. Canceled anything. She looked around the bookstore. Now I don't even want to pick up the phone. The sadness in her voice hurt more than anger ever could have. Then she looked at me. That's probably a problem. I wanted to tell her it wasn't. I wanted to tell her she could stay forever. I wanted to tell her New York could wait. But reality doesn't disappear just because you don't like it. Then Charlotte's phone buzzed again, another message. This time she opened it. Her expression immediately changed. My stomach dropped. What? Charlotte swallowed. Emergency board meeting. Another pause. Tomorrow morning. Silence. Complete silence. Then she looked up. If I don't attend, her voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish. We both understood. Read Global was already unstable. Investors were nervous. Executives were divided. Another absence could cost her everything. Then Charlotte smiled sadly. I have to go. The words landed like a punch. because hearing them out loud made them real. The next morning arrived far too quickly. Lily noticed something was wrong almost immediately. Children always do. Charlotte tried to act normal during breakfast. She failed miserably. I wasn't doing much better. Then Lily put down her cereal spoon. "What's happening?" Nobody answered. The little girl narrowed her eyes. "Okay." Another pause. "Something is definitely happening." Charlotte looked at me. I looked at Charlotte. Then Lily sighed dramatically. "You're both terrible liars." Fair point. Finally, Charlotte reached across the table and took Lily's hand. "I need to go to New York." Silence. Complete silence. The child stared at her, then asked the question we'd both been dreading. "For how long?" Charlotte opened her mouth, closed it again, then whispered, "I don't know." Lily looked down immediately. My heart broke. Then Charlotte moved beside her chair and knelt down. "Hey." Silence. "Look at me." Slowly, Lily did. Tears already filled her eyes. Charlotte's voice softened. "I'm not leaving because of you." Another pause. "I'm not leaving because of your dad." Another pause. "There are some things I need to fix." The child listened quietly, then asked the one question nobody was prepared for. When your memory came back, her voice shook. "Did you stop loving us?" The room shattered. Completely shattered. Charlotte froze. I froze. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Then Charlotte pulled Lily into her arms immediately. "No." Her voice broke. "No, sweetheart." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Never." Another pause, not for 1 second. Lily buried her face against Charlotte's shoulder. Then Charlotte whispered the truth. My memory came back weeks ago. My pulse stopped, because this was the first time Lily had heard it. The little girl slowly looked up, confused. "Weeks?" Charlotte nodded, crying openly now. I remembered everything. Another pause, and I stayed. Silence swallowed the room. Then Charlotte smiled through tears. "Because I wanted to." Lily stared at her for several seconds. Finally, she wrapped her arms around Charlotte's neck. "Good." Another pause. "Because you're my mom anyway." That was it. Charlotte completely broke. Tears, laughter, relief, all at once. Even I had to look away for a moment. Later that afternoon, the black SUV arrived, just like the day Charlotte first came to Willow Creek. Except this time, nobody was excited. Main Street felt strangely quiet. The bookstore felt too empty already. Ava loaded luggage into the vehicle while Charlotte stood beside the sidewalk staring at the town she'd accidentally fallen in love with. Then she turned toward me. My pulse tightened instantly. There were 1,000 things I wanted to say. None of them seemed enough. Charlotte smiled sadly. "I hate this." "Me too." Silence followed. Then she laughed softly. "We're really bad at goodbyes." Still, another pause. "Apparently." The smile faded. Her eyes searched mine. Then she whispered, "I meant what I said last night." My heart hammered. "I know." Another pause. "Did you?" There it was. The question, the one we'd been circling around for weeks, the one neither of us could avoid anymore. Then Charlotte looked away briefly, like she was preparing herself for disappointment. The sight nearly destroyed me, so I stepped closer, close enough to see the tears she was trying not to show. Then I answered honestly. "Every day you were here." Another pause. "I kept telling myself not to fall in love with you." Charlotte's breath caught. Then I smiled sadly. Turns out I was too late. For a second, she just stared at me. Then tears filled her eyes again. The happy kind this time. The dangerous kind. Then she laughed through them. "You picked a terrible moment to say that." "I know. I'm literally leaving." "I know." She shook her head, smiling, crying. Beautiful. Then, before either of us could lose our nerve, she kissed me. Right there, on Main Street. In front of the bookstore. In front of Ava. In front of Mrs. Henderson, who nearly dropped a flower pot. In front of half the town that was pretending not to watch. The kiss lasted only a few seconds, long enough to change everything, short enough to hurt when it ended. Then Charlotte rested her forehead against mine. "Come get me." My pulse stopped. "What?" Her smile trembled. "When I finish fixing my life." Another pause. Come get me. Tears threatened to destroy what little self-control I had left. Then Charlotte stepped backward, slowly, reluctantly. The distance felt unbearable. She climbed into the SUV, the door closed, the engine started, and for the second time in her life, Charlotte Reed drove away from someone she loved. The difference was that this time she wasn't leaving because she wanted to. As the SUV disappeared down Main Street, Lily walked over and slipped her hand into mine. We watched until the vehicle vanished completely. Then she looked up at me. You're going after her, right? I stared at the empty road, at the place where our future had just disappeared around a corner. Then I smiled, small, certain, determined. Yeah. Another pause. I think I am. And for the first time since Charlotte arrived in Willow Creek, I knew exactly what I had to do. And for the first time since Charlotte arrived in Willow Creek, I knew exactly what I had to do. The problem was that knowing what to do and actually doing it are two very different things. For the next 3 weeks, I tried to be responsible. I focused on the bookstore. I focused on Lily. I focused on everything except the woman who occupied every free thought in my head. It didn't work. Not even a little. Charlotte called every night. Sometimes for 10 minutes. Sometimes for 2 hours. Sometimes neither of us had anything important to say. We just didn't want to hang up. New York had swallowed her again. Board meetings, investors, interviews, crisis management. Reed Global was recovering, but it required every ounce of her attention. Yet somehow she still found time to ask about Lily's spelling tests. She still remembered which customers came into the bookstore on Thursdays. She still wanted pictures of every ridiculous drawing Lily made. The distance wasn't killing what we had. It was proving how real it was. Then one evening, everything changed. Charlotte sounded different on the phone. Quieter. Tired. Long day? I asked. She laughed softly. You have no idea. Another pause. The board finally approved the restructuring plan. That's good, right? Silence. Then she answered, It should be. My stomach tightened immediately. But, Charlotte sighed, but I spent 20 years building something. Another pause. And today I realized I don't want it to be my entire life anymore. The words lingered between us. Then she whispered, I don't think New York feels like home anymore. My chest tightened painfully, because I knew exactly what she meant. 3 days later, I received a package. No return address, just my name written across the front. Inside was a framed photograph from the Willow Creek Summer Fair. The family portrait. Me, Charlotte, Lily. Standing together beneath the summer sun, smiling, looking exactly like what we'd accidentally become. Taped to the back was a note. I never got my memories of this family. So I made new ones. Charlotte. That was the moment I stopped being responsible. The next morning I called Ava. I need a favor. Ava laughed immediately. It's about time. 48 hours later, Lily and I stood inside Grand Central Terminal in New York City. The place was louder than our entire town combined. Lily stared upward in amazement. This place is huge. Yep, I'm never driving here. Smart. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Board meeting. Top floor. 30 minutes. Good luck. My pulse exploded. Reed Global headquarters towered above Manhattan like something built by people who enjoyed intimidating others. Lily squeezed my hand. You nervous? Terrified. Good. I blinked. Good, she nodded seriously. That means it's important. Sometimes, children accidentally become philosophers. The elevator ride to the top floor lasted less than a minute. It felt like an hour. When the doors opened, Ava was waiting. The moment she saw us, she smiled. About time. Apparently everyone in my life had decided I was slow. Then she led us down a hallway lined with glass walls and conference rooms. Voices echoed from the boardroom ahead. Important voices. Expensive voices. CEO voices. Ava stopped outside the door. Then she handed me a visitor badge. Ready? Not even remotely. Then she grinned. Too bad. Before I could argue, she opened the door. The boardroom fell silent immediately. 12 executives turned toward us. Several board members looked confused. One looked annoyed. Charlotte sat at the head of the table, in the same position she'd occupied for years. Powerful. Elegant. Brilliant. The CEO. Then she looked up. And everything stopped. Completely stopped. For several seconds neither of us moved. The executives disappeared. The board disappeared. The city disappeared. There was only Charlotte. Then she stood up so fast her chair nearly fell backward. "Ethan?" My pulse hammered. "Hi." Silence swallowed the room. Then Lily waved. "Hi, Mom." Half the board looked like they needed medical attention. Charlotte didn't seem to notice. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Then she laughed. The same laugh I'd heard beside the lake, inside the bookstore, at the summer fair, home. Then she walked toward us. Fast, very fast. 1 second, she stood across the room. The next, she was in front of me. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Then she threw her arms around me. Right there in front of the board of directors. Right there in front of investors. Right there in front of everyone. The CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation completely forgot she was supposed to be impressive. And honestly, I'd never loved her more. The boardroom erupted into awkward silence. Then Lily cleared her throat dramatically. "I think this means he came to get you." Charlotte laughed through tears. Then she pulled back just enough to look at me. "You came. You told me to." Another pause. "Besides," I smiled, "I got tired of missing you." More tears. More laughter. Then Charlotte shook her head. "You picked a terrible time." I glanced around the room. Seems to be a habit. That finally made her laugh properly. Then she took my hand. Not secretly, not carefully, openly, proudly, finally. Then she turned toward the board. Meeting adjourned. One board member blinked. "Charlotte, we're discussing no." She smiled. "We're done." Silence followed. Then Charlotte looked at me. Really looked at me, like she had the day she woke up in that hospital room. The difference was that now she remembered everything. The accident, the company, the marriage, the grief, the loneliness, all of it, and she still chose us. Then she knelt beside Lily. "Can I ask you something?" Lily nodded. "Sure," Charlotte smiled. "Do you still want me as your mom?" The child looked horrified. "Obviously." The answer arrived so fast the entire room laughed. Then Lily added, "That was a very silly question." Charlotte covered her face while laughing. And in that moment, the last piece of the future clicked into place. 6 months later, Charlotte split her time between New York and Willow Creek. 1 year later, Reed Global opened a major literacy foundation funded by Charlotte and managed from a new office above the Reading Nook. 2 years later, Charlotte officially moved to Willow Creek, not because she had forgotten who she was, because she finally remembered who she wanted to be. On a warm summer evening, the three of us sat on the bookstore balcony, watching the sunset paint the town gold. Charlotte leaned against me. Lily sat between us, explaining an elaborate plan involving dragons, books, and a lemonade empire. Nobody understood it, not even Lily. Then Charlotte smiled and looked out across Willow Creek. "You know what's funny?" "What?" She laughed softly. "The worst day of my life turned into the best thing that ever happened to me." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. I was thinking the same thing. Then Lily groaned dramatically. "You two are being mushy again." Charlotte laughed. I laughed. Even Lily eventually laughed, and as the sun disappeared beyond the lake, I realized something. Charlotte Reed had lost her memory. But in the process, she found something far more important. A home, a family, a future, and sometimes the people we're meant to love aren't the people we remember. They're the people who help us remember who we really are. The end.